How you doing there, Steph?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I was having a rough week last week, and I, of course, thought it would last forever, and that was going to be my new normal. But this week's panned out okay.
Funny how that happens, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So your stress levels are, where would you say this week? In terms of your baseline?
Um, Average. I think they're pretty average. I'm going away this weekend, and that's a little bit of a different kind of stress that I feel just, having to pack and get everything ready, for the weekend and also just the stress of going away and what that invites. That's a little bit on my mind, but everything else feels pretty status quo. You?
I'm laughing because Steph and I have checked in a little bit before this recording, and I'm in the middle of one of the most stressful weeks I've had for a very long time.
Tell us. How has
Oh,
that
tell
how's
us.
that been impacting you? Well, you could share the details too.
Well, I'm in the process of buying my first home. And this week, it's probably good varies from country to country how the process works, but here we have an exchange date and a completion date. Today's Thursday. We were supposed to exchange on Monday. That became Tuesday. That became Wednesday. That is supposed to be today. So I'm still waiting to find out if we're exchanging today. I might even find out in the middle of this podcast recording
Mhm.
if I'm
Crossed
exchanging.
fingers.
And there's a few things I think that make it the most stressful. So far I've had a really easy ride with buying this place. And I always heard people would always say how stressful it is to buy somewhere. Um, and I was saying, I'm just laughing at my cockiness now. I was saying only a few weeks ago to my friend again, I've just been so chilled about this. I feel really like what will be. And I don't know why people get so stressed about this stuff. They ask you for things, you give them things, and then you just let it go. Yeah. What what I hadn't so far come up against was having to deal with other people not doing things that they say they'll do, and then not telling me or giving me
Mm,
updates when they say they'll give me updates, and then one person saying one thing and someone else saying something else. And these are the things that have been compounding the stress. So it's not just powerlessness, that's a piece of it. But
mm.
I'm usually quite good at like collapsing into passivity under powerlessness. But on this occasion, it's
Look, you
there's
look
still
like.
stuff and expectations of me and like, worries about getting it wrong and other people getting very stressed as well.
Do you think stress has to do with not having control over something? I wonder what the definition of stress is. More to the point, I'll look that up, but more to the point. How has that, like, we're here to talk about how stress might impact our appetite
Hmm.
or the way we eat or the way we cope, body image, any of that relevant?
Yes.
Oh,
Not
I don't
body
know what I was
image.
expecting you to say, but
Oh,
okay.
well, see, I thought I was kind of priding myself on being this person who was going to be the most Zen person who's ever bought a place. Because I feel like I can do the acceptance thing fairly well when something really feels outside of my control. But because some of this stuff is partially in my control, there's a sense of unfairness as well about people not doing what they say they're going to do. That's what has made this, I think, more challenging. But on Tuesday evening, so Tuesday is one of my busiest days, client wise. And because we hadn't exchanged on the Monday and we were now exchanging on the Tuesday, if it didn't get done on the Tuesday, the seller, he's booked removal company, was going to lose his removal slot. And he's threatening to pull out if it doesn't happen and all of this. And I've got the estate agent on the phone who's stressed out at me, or realtor for American listeners. And my solicitor's not calling me back. And I'm in and out of client sessions as well. And I finish work at 7 p.m. and it hasn't happened. Another day's gone by and we haven't exchanged. And I don't understand what's going on. I don't know if I've done something wrong. I don't know what, like, I don't know. I don't have the information at this point. And I only had a couple of options for dinner. One was this thing that's been sitting in my fridge now for a week because I saw it in the supermarket. Have you ever done that? You saw something in the supermarket and you're like, oh, I think I fancy that for lunch or something one day,
Yeah.
and you never fancy it. Can I get it?
Yes.
Just a sec.
Yes. I'd like that. Wonder if we could zoom up the video, like time lapse it.
So here it is. It's a make called Bol, B-O-L, and it's a one pot meal, a Thai massaman curry, and it's vegetarian, but it's got lots of beans and stuff like that in, if you see.
I can see.
That is a great idea on a day when it's like, I don't want to prepare anything. I just want to grab something. I thought, I bet
Jealous.
that's really tasty. I bet it's really satisfying. And it's still dated till the 20th, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
It's dated until tomorrow. And not once, every time I open the fridge, it's looking at me. And not once have I fancied it. And so Tuesday daytime, I was thinking, right, I'm going to have that for dinner. I open the fridge and I'm like, not like, I wanted to shout no. I cannot tell you how much I didn't want this. And I didn't have any other options unless I wanted to cook a 40-minute gusto meal, which I did not. And so I had this moment where I wanted to pull my own skin off. I couldn't regulate in the moment. I couldn't regulate. Just to bounce, I'm going to bounce around a bit probably because I'm still probably up there a little bit. But both Sunday and Monday night, I've gone to sit on the yoga mat to do my yoga. And both times I've sat down, I've just felt completely overwhelmed and either cried or just sat there. I just haven't done my yoga. I've been too physically dysregulated to do yoga, the very thing that feels like would actually make me feel more regulated. And I was like, how does this doesn't even make rational sense now. I'm not even doing the thing that I think might be able to help me. But Sunday I sat on the mat and it was like there was so much tension in my body. I just couldn't bear to be with it and I just burst into tears. Here's the strange thing. My thoughts don't feel that stressed.
Yes, I hear you.
It's my body is stressed.
Yes.
And in my mind, I'm going, it's okay. Will be. Yeah, it'll be really horrible if this doesn't work out, but you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. All of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And I believe it. But then I'm like, do I not believe it? Am I just kidding myself?
Can I talk to that?
Yes, please.
I experienced that a lot, a ton. And I think this is what's confusing. And this is to me what the difference between the effectiveness of thought work versus the effectiveness of somatic work, because where our thoughts are becoming the dysregulating force, I think that's a great place for like CBT and affirmations. And there's a way of addressing the thoughts that can calm down the body. But when there's a discrepancy, then I believe that to be more of a nervous system specific issue, which happens to me all the time, where I'm like so frustrated with myself because I'm like, I'm fine about this. Like, I'm cool.
You sound it. You sound it.
Well, it's like the frustration, the stress that comes from the fact that I'm not stressed, but I'm stressed. Like, that happens to me a lot. And that's the respect I have for like, well, there's something going on in my body that I'm not privy to. And I'm not going to address that through my mind.
Yeah. And it's humbling for me because it's not something that I experience that often. And it's like, oh, you with your like, oh, you do your yoga and you do this, aren't you great at regulating yourself kind of thing? And then, so there's some self-judgment going on for me as well.
I think people will relate.
Not so much now because I've just allowed the experience to humble me, but at the time I was resisting it. So on Tuesday night, I'm like, I have no idea what to do, and I'm just pissed off. And this is the interesting thing because it definitely came in like an F it moment where I was just like, F it, I'm ordering Domino's pizza. You have Domino's in the US, don't you?
We do. You talked. Is Domino's one of your favorites?
It would be mine. It would be my go-to pizza. Not necessarily everybody. Some people don't like it here. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's pretty popular here. Maybe the most popular out of the pizza delivery people. Now all the Papa John's people are going to come at me. But
you have Papa John's? I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, we do. I think I've only had it once in my whole life, but it does exist.
Did you used to have Pizza Hut?
Yeah, we still do.
You still do? I haven't seen one in ages, but
yeah.
That's neither here nor there. So you decided you were like, I'm going to just order Domino's.
I'm going to order Domino's, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just order an individual pizza. They do these individual pizzas that they do individual, small, medium, and large. But there's like an offer on where the small is like half price, and then the medium's half price, and the large is half price, but the individual isn't discounted. So the small was cheaper than the individual.
Got it. Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you actively did not want the bowl that you just showed us, but you were aligned with having the Domino. So that felt like something you wanted. Do you know like the difference?
Yes. But because I was stressed, there was a bit of unease in me was about, is this what I really want? Or is this going to not actually be what I really want? Because it almost feels like my brain is going, you don't know what to do with yourself. So the solution is Domino's.
Why would that have been more a solution than just having the bowl though?
I just think there is something about pizza.
Okay. That's what I mean. What's the difference here?
Even, I guess, the taste of it, the density of it, the the flavors of it. This is like a one pot meal. Whereas pizza, I know it's kind of every mouthful is fairly similar, but it was just a pull. I wasn't even thinking straight. So
Yeah.
I ordered now in the old days, in my binging days, I would have ordered the pizza. I would have ordered the box of 4 Domino's cookies. Do they do them over there? Like hot
Hmm.
cookies.
Hmm.
And sometimes I would order like a tub of ice cream because I'd have to bring it up to a certain amount. And that would have been what I had previously done.
Yeah.
Now they do the cookies in boxes of 2 instead of 4.
Who knew?
Well, I did. So I ordered some.
But this was not part of an effort mentality.
Well, this is where at the time I was like, I'm not sure if it is because I'm
Got
so
it.
stressed and because I feel angry at the thought of
Yeah.
having to eat this other food. I cannot tell you how big it felt in that moment. A lot of the time, because, I order gusto meals and quite often it might be like, oh, I'm not sure I really fancy this, but this is the meal that I've got because it's what I ordered the other week. And I just have it and it's fine.
Hmm.
There was so much resistance to that.
Yeah, I hear you. I think this is relatable.
Yeah. So I order my pizza and my pizza arrives. And I sit down and I start eating my pizza. And then I'm halfway through my pizza and I'm like, I'm done. And there was a little part of my brain going, it's half a small pizza and you're done. And then I was like, yeah, I think I'm done. I mean, not cookies done because there's always room for cookies, right? But I think I'm done with the pizza. And then that's a whole half a pizza left. That's another meal tomorrow that I don't have to worry about as well. And it was a real sense of, and what I noticed as well, there was a couple of things about why I feel like this is very different to my binging days, which is the things that I want to pull out. I was not disconnected from my body. Before, like in an effort
Yeah.
moment, it would have been like, right, I've got my pizza, I'm watching something, and I am cut off from the neck down. Like I
Yeah.
am not registering anything that's going on down here until the food's finished and I feel unwell. That wasn't like I felt myself filling up and I felt my satiation hit. And that surprised me, I think at the
Can
time, because yeah, please do. Go on.
I'm trying. So but you're still dysregulated, right?
Yeah.
So in dysregulation, you can still be connected to yourself. I think for myself that part of what can happen is that dysregulation becomes such an uncomfortable experience that the instinct to disconnect would be high in dysregulation. I'm wondering what like enables us to be more comfortable with dysreg, not more comfortable like we like it, but just more present, be able to be present so that you can stay in the body. I would expect that has to do with your work. Your like you have been doing like the Ralic method for a lot. Like this is something you are accountable to all the time. You know
Mm.
what I mean? So that practice is more available to you.
I think as well, even though there was a tiny bit of unease in me about the energy behind ordering the Dominoes, there wasn't guilt.
Yeah.
There certainly wasn't shame. And of course, previously it would have been like, I need to eat all the pizza and get the box out of the house so that I don't even have to look at it the next day. And I'm thinking, oh, cool, I've got half a pizza for lunch tomorrow. The attitude and the judgment around what I was doing was very different.
Yeah.
And that for me, I think, was a big part of what enabled me to stay connected to
Yes.
my sense of fullness and
Yes.
enoughness and filling up. But it also, what it did do for me is it did change my state. So I felt really good afterwards. Sometimes you might order, you might eat something and afterwards you don't necessarily physically feel that great. You might have
Yeah.
enjoyed eating it, but you don't feel that great. I felt great.
Yeah.
My body
Yeah.
was just not completely like out of the woods or anything, but it really did change my state in a moment where I was so overwhelmed and couldn't even think straight and didn't have another tool that felt available to me in that moment. I hadn't been able to do yoga for the last 2 nights because that hadn't felt
Yeah.
available to me. And it was like
Mm.
Domino's worked. Not
Mm.
sponsored by Domino's, by the way.
But feel free to, Domino's. Do you think that there's a physiological reason in addition to psychological reasons behind that? Because I know that when I'm at a stress level that high, I need a bunch of carbohydrates.
Mhm.
Like at least I think that might be what is happening. I don't know if it's just comfort food versus, and that's the emotional piece, but I have felt enough times and I've thought about it enough times where I'm like, it will calm me down. It will settle me. And it's like, is this directly related to carbohydrates that potentially the other foods aren't offering? And you know what? I spoke to a client about this the other week. Bread. Like the difference between bread and potatoes, both are carbohydrates, but there is something about bread that sometimes nothing else will do, like except bread. Like that is what gives me that satiation that I'm looking for.
Hmm. Yeah. And pasta would have done the same as well.
Okay.
Had there been like a delicious pasta dish
Mm,
available for me that I had to do zero preparation for, I
mm.
think I would have had that quite happily and not even been
Yeah.
thinking about
I
Domino's.
don't know about pasta for me. I feel like it's maybe. There's something about bread, but you wonder if there's some kind of physiological something that happens when we're in a state like that that's why we call it comfort food because that and also sugar has been that for me too where it's like I need that is what I need and nothing else is going to do it and we demonize that and I know I used to be like I would have in that position I would have found everything all the things around bread that I could possibly supplement as carbohydrates without going for the bread even though the bread is what I needed.
And I had to make it up to a certain amount because the pizza was on discount. So I also ordered a tub of ice cream. And I
They
didn't,
sell ice cream.
yeah.
Oh,
Do
I
they not?
don't think I don't think so, but I haven't had Domino's in 30 years.
Yeah, because I had to think, what can I order that isn't hot food? And so I got the ice cream, and the ice cream went in the freezer, and I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
It's still in the freezer. I've had some, but it's still in the freezer. And that's just, it was one of those things to do something that seemed to skim so close
Mm,
what I used to
yeah.
do, but a different experience. And that's partly why, I want to share this anecdote, if you like, to try and show what this might look like in recovery.
Yeah. Brilliant. Because it's not a deal breaker to go towards that. Right? Like if that is experience is happening to you, it doesn't mean that you're failing or you're in binge mode. The difference between potentially the binge route and this route is decreased shame and guilt and presence and then the availability of the presence there.
And satisfaction.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
genuinely have felt satisfied. And the different emotional state meant that my signals were still available to me. It wasn't like I was sitting there eating it slowly and mindfully.
Right.
Yet I was still kind of connected. I just remember when I looked at this one pot meal thing that I had in the fridge, I could just imagine it inside my stomach. And it was actually like repulsive to me.
Yeah.
It was
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
such a strong reaction.
Um, two things, which the second one I've already forgotten, but the first one was what about somebody who would say, well, if I had done that, I would have eaten the whole pizza and the cookies and the ice cream. Like it's impossible for me to order food like that and not do that. Not eat it all. Like I can't do what you're doing.
Well, I would also say it's taken a long time to get here. I think even early on in my recovery, because my recovery was about my binging becoming less and less frequent. So this would have been the hardest moment out of all the moments to try and navigate in recovery. How do I navigate ordering something like a takeaway on my own when I have to order a certain amount of food? How do I get around the psychology and the reasons why I'm ordering it so that it feels like, actually, yeah, this is what I want. This is something that I think is what I need right now. Whether that's emotion, I don't necessarily mean like from a physical perspective or
Mm,
anything like that.
right.
That,
That's important what you just said.
yeah.
I think the like allowing that to be true because I think intuitive eating can sound like you eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're full, or you eat what you need, what your body needs. And this is a case potentially for some level of emotional eating that
Mhm.
you could maybe put this under that umbrella. I would also call it like dysregulation, like regulating potentially too.
The other point I want to make as well is it would have been okay if I'd eaten the whole pizza. This is not like a pat on my back. It was more the surprise that it took me by surprise that I was like, oh, I really genuinely feel like I've had
Yeah.
enough because that hasn't always been available to me. But
Yeah.
had the pizza come and I had eaten the whole pizza, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Whether it's bingy or not is not about how much exact food I ate. It's more like the energy around it, what my psychology was around it, all of that
Right.
kind of combined. But yeah.
I think it's also the availability of hearing your own cues.
Yeah.
Because if you eat a whole pizza, but that's what your body needs, and then you
Hmm.
could feel it's about like can you hear when you're finished? I don't think you can hear that when you're berating yourself or
No,
when you're checked out. You just
no.
can't.
Or if I'd turned it into a battle, if I'd spent like 20 minutes battling with myself and
Yeah.
then ordered it, it
Yeah.
probably would have been a very different experience. That part of my brain that was triggered
Yeah.
by scarcity might be triggered.
How did what became available after that, if anything? So you said that you felt like something
Mm.
was good about like so you felt. Can you rephrase what you felt afterwards?
I really noticed as I was filling up, I didn't stop because I felt stuffed. I stopped because I felt full and satisfied. And to be able to go from a state of feeling so stressed to feeling satisfied, albeit with food, it was a shift in state, I think, that happened for me, just out of this tension inside. So when I looked up stress earlier today, it described it as tension, psychological
Pressure.
and emotional tension and pressure, and physical as well. I don't know why I didn't say physical, but it is physical too. Because even if you like lift a weight, that's
Yeah.
the stress on the body, but that doesn't have to necessarily be psychological and emotional. And so it was a release of tension, like the body was able to let go of the tension. So it move,
Hmm.
if you look at it, I mean, I know I'm always going on about the nervous system, but if you talk about it like that, it's like,
Yeah.
your parasympathetic nervous system's been activated.
Yes.
You're in the rest and
That's
digest state.
yeah. This is the what regulating does, I think. Do you remember what happened after? Not about food, but just how your state shifted in for the rest of the evening?
So Tuesday night, this was my third attempt at doing yoga, day three, right? Haven't managed to do it Sunday or Monday. So I'm on the yoga and I can feel all the resistance. I do not want to go on the yoga mat and pay attention to what's going on in my body. That was still there. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick one that's specifically for anxiety. I was having an interesting chat actually with one of my therapist friends about this doesn't feel like anxiety, but it kind of feels close to what people sometimes talk about when they talk about that. And we were talking about actually the difference between anxiety and feeling anxious. So I would
Mm.
say I was feeling anxious as opposed to how I think of like anxiety with a capital A. But again, it can be thought of in lots of different ways. So I looked up a yoga for anxiety. So there was a 18-minute one by Yoga with Adrienne, Yoga for Anxiety. I thought, okay, great, 18 minutes, I can do that. So I sit on the yoga mat. The first 90 seconds are kind of like, grounding, settling in, breathing, and whatever. And I noticed the minute I do that, I'm getting teary again. Not crying like I was last time, but just a little bit teary. And then do you know about alternate nostril breathing in
Hmm.
yoga? So that was the first thing, right? So we start doing that, but because I'm a little bit teary, my nose is starting to run, and I can't do the alternate nostril breathing, and I just slammed my computer shut in a half and dropped off. I was
That's
like,
why you laughed.
even when, yeah,
Yeah.
even when I was like, okay, I'm gonna do an 18-minute
Yeah.
one. I only did a couple of minutes. But for me, and again, like with the yoga, there's no judgment if I don't do my yoga. It's much more about intention. So I go over to the mat, and if the resistance is really high, sometimes there's a difference between resistance and reluctance.
Hmm.
But there can be reluctance, and I'll just go along, and I tend to move through the reluctance when I'm there. But if I get on that mat and there's a real pushback, that's resistance.
Yeah. Can I don't know that you'll know the answer to this necessarily, but the resistance essentially you're describing a state of stress that where I would say like you're up in fight or flight, and yoga is more parasympathetic. So I think that we can be in a certain state of fight or flight and access parasympathetic, where and that can be super helpful. That was such an American thing to say. Super
Yeah.
helpful. But sometimes we're too high in it, and just to try to ask your body to go into parasympathetic, it's like no. And I think that's where I would slam the computer down and be like, no, I'm too fast and high. So if you had done some kind of, I don't even know if yoga would be it, but if the ask was to have done something faster, do you think you would have been able to stay with it?
Probably. Like I went to the gym on Tuesday morning, and that was helpful. I felt a lot better Tuesday morning. It wasn't till lunchtime that I started to feel more agitated again. I think I was by a thin thread. It was one of those days where I think if I had just done a yoga, I would have come down. But because it was this thin thread, that when I couldn't do the thing that I was being asked to do, it was like a real like inner child tantrum moment where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I want to go, what do you want from me? I'm
Yeah.
trying to do everything that I know to
Yeah.
do. Even this, even the yoga thing that's for anxiety is not helping me in
Yeah.
this moment. So it was more like I think almost any other yoga that I'd have done that day, if I'd done a slower one, I think I would have stayed with it and I think it would have been helpful. I think it was just because I was still coming down that it was just like being poked with something sharp.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for goodness sake, there's like
Yeah. I
a
don't think that's,
reaction to
I think sometimes people feel really guilty about something like that. Like I can't even calm myself down. And that's the thing I'm supposed to do. And that's where I would say, like, if your state is such that you're in a certain place in it, that does make rational sense. Like that is, it's like the way that deep breathing can be triggering for people who are like way up here because it's like, no, it's like, and then it's like, I can't even do that. And then that guilt, I think it's fair. I think that's just to name that. Like that happens to me too. And it's okay, fine. That's fine. You didn't, that's fine. Like
it.
let yourself go.
So then I got into bed that night and I was kind of going through my thoughts and I was just letting everything go and I was just surrendering the situation and all of that. And my mind felt really calm, but my body still, it didn't feel nearly as agitated as it was, but I could still feel that my heartbeat wasn't quite slowing down as I would want it to for sleep. And my breath felt a little bit short. And so I do this thing when I notice those kinds of feelings in my body, like if I notice my heart rate fast and my breathing, is I move right towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this wouldn't be available for me like if I was having a panic attack, probably. I've never had a panic attack, but do you know what I mean? I understand that there's a certain
Mm.
level where this might not be available, but at this kind of agitation level, it was available. And so I was just counting my breaths and I was just elongating my breaths and I was just staying with my heartbeat. And then, I would just accept that my heart was beating fast and then it would slow down again. And then it might speed up again. And then I get annoyed. And then I'd be, no, 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 you've got to accept. And then I would just accept. But then sometimes I was accepting and then my heart rate wasn't slowing down. And then I realized I was only accepting to try and make it slow down. So
Right.
then I had to let go of that. And
Yeah. Well, to remember too, like, and this is something I keep in mind for myself as well. Your nervous system is not necessarily like it's adaptive to be in a high stress situation when you have high stress going on. You're not supposed to always be calm, So if your body's not calming down, maybe it needs to not calm down. It's appropriate for it to be in a state of high stress sometimes that matches the circumstance. Well, not that maybe we could see, but that it does.
well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I guess as well, I think it's important to remind ourselves that stress can have a delayed onset response as well.
Yeah.
So that's a really common thing to be in a situation and be like, I'm kind of fine in this stressful
Yeah.
situation. And then a day later or a week later, sometimes even longer than that, you have a big
Yeah.
crash. I think only now, when I was thinking about this, realizing how much I think the pandemic affected me. Because when everything was kicking off, I was like, I'm fine. Like, this is just, yeah, we're in this big global uncertainty, but, like, this is different. Let's see what happens here. And I thought I was
Mm.
fine. And actually, when I look at the timing of particularly through kind of 2021 into 2022, I think that might have been like a delayed
Yeah.
response to the pandemic.
That's my pediatrician for my kids um reflected that. She said that there were so many kids in 2021, 2022 who were coming in with kind of unexplained chronic digestive distress that they were attributing to like kind of post-COVID stress.
Yeah.
That's what she told me. I've heard that elsewhere.
It's making me think of situations that I'm imagining you could probably relate to. Let's say, talking back when you're in a situation where perhaps you're feeling stressed because maybe you're around people that you don't feel comfortable around, or you're in a situation you're not feeling comfortable in your own body, and you get out of that situation and you calm down
Mhm.
and then you binge.
Yeah, totally. I think that's what that is.
But I
It's
think
like
a lot,
stored.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A lot of people I don't think would necessarily associate that with stress, like a stress
Mm.
response.
Well, I also think people would think that was irrational. Kind of like I'm out of the stress. Why would I be stressed? And I think you in the beginning of this said something to the effect of it didn't seem rational.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we learn more about the way that the nervous system works, it it's like, oh, it does make sense. And I think that's to me, it's like, oh, that makes everything better. Like, it makes sense to me. I can let go of a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if we were to try and oversimplify the solutions, let's say somebody is really feels like they're stress eating a lot. And as it often, I don't know about you, but certainly was the case for me. I do know about you, it would be the case for you as well, that I might eat when I'm stressed, but
Mhm.
I'm also really stressed about the fact I'm eating when I'm stressed. So this is this
Yep.
compounding thing. And in fact, the focus of mentally of the stress would probably be on the fact I was eating
Yeah,
more than the situation.
definitely. That's called allostatic load. Well, allostatic load being invisible stress, like kind of like the weight you carry that you're not even necessarily aware of that you could just kind of chronically carry. And I think with weight stigma, people who are chronically feeling like their body is wrong every single day based on society, having to go out in the world and navigate, like, is someone going to make a comment about my body today? Am I going to fit in the seat today? And or judgment about our own food all the time, every day. That chronic stress that's just always baseline there is like an invisible stress we carry. It decreases the window of tolerance for other kinds of stresses.
Mhm.
So if that's running in your background all the time anyway, that's where that guilt and shame factor, if that's always there, if you're dealing with that on a day in and day out basis, yeah, I think stress eating is a relevant term, even if you're not necessarily relating to acute periods of stress like you're describing.
Mhm. Do you think because stress is a response to all kinds of things, all kinds of situations and um, psychologies, trauma, all of that, do you think that there is or there are things practically that we can offer in this episode, for example?
For example,
Um, for example, so well, I don't mean
like,
like let's go
oh,
and write a
just
book.
look.
I mean now, things
Yeah.
we could offer now, I think was what I was trying to say, that are helpful practically for people, or do you think it's too broad to be able to
Mm,
talk about it in a practical way?
both. I think that we can offer practical advice or suggestions or ways of thinking about it, all the while understanding that this is much more nuanced and complex than practical suggestions could help, could
Mhm.
entirely encompass.
Yeah.
So practical, well, we can move towards some practical, which
Let's
I don't say
shuffle.
advice, but practical tools. What under with the understanding that it's not going to solve the problem.
Mhm.
Did you want to go first?
It can sound like if stress eating is the problem, if you're approaching it in a very all or nothing way, it can sound like that the solution must be one, get rid of the stress, right? Just don't be stressed. Just be like zen and let everything go. Don't be a stressed person. It's easy, right? Or two, oh, well, I live in a world where I can't avoid stress. So I just have to figure out how to not eat or not quote unquote overeat when I feel stressed.
Yeah.
And both of those are quite unrealistic
Yeah.
in any kind of black and white way. So I guess the way I would begin to start to think about it is about managing and reducing stress where possible and building our coping strategies to cope with stress so that those two move in more to that middle ground. So we're accepting that there is stress in our life. We're also trying to see how might we be compounding our stress and make it worse, where it might be possible for us not to do that, versus actually being able to tolerate stress and regulate ourselves when we feel it.
Mm-hmm. I can hear myself wanting to go towards the angle of like decreasing guilt and understanding how that amount of stress is contributing to things. But do you think it's better to talk about practical tools for managing stress, like absent of the food piece?
Well, I think the two are going to be so connected because there's the original stress and then there's extra stress about eating on top of that stress.
Yeah,
So I don't
right.
know that I think they can be spoken about
Okay.
together, maybe.
Together.
I don't know.
Okay. Let's see where we get. Um, okay, so I guess I'll just start with where I'm at. I think about managing my stress. One of them is actually when you mentioned, I don't know if you would have been able to move towards the sensation of your heart beating if you were having a panic attack. Actually, I have done that in a panic attack or an anxiety attack, not necessarily panic attack. I haven't had one of those in years. But I will have anxiety attacks and I do move towards. So it works for me to do that. So when I am feeling that rush of stress, this is, by the way, so much harder when it's not a rush of stress, when it's a low level stress, just like a quieter hum of stress. But if there's a physical symptom associated with my stress, to move towards that as opposed to away from that has been game changing for me. Running away from it has increased the amount of stress, whereas allowing what I would picture as a flood to rise up, come over my head, just fill my ears. My face gets red. My chest is buzzing. Being in that, like the guy in, I'm going to use the Shawshank Redemption again, you know, when he gets out of the hole and he stands up in the rain and he just like opens his arms wide and he's staring at the sky and the rain just pounding on him like that. That's what I do when I'm feeling that kind of stress that's really dysregulating. And that is a way I actually manage it because running from it makes it worse for me.
Who would have thought that film would just have so many
Yeah.
analogies? Yes. And I also, for me, I think about that as when we resist something and we get in a battle with it, it gets bigger and it gets worse. So a lot of the time when I am checking in with what I'm feeling and trying to allow that, and I'm trying to go, okay, I'll say to myself things like, okay, well, I'd say I notice I'm feeling overwhelmed. Why would I accept that I'm feeling overwhelmed? Like, why would I accept that? I don't want to feel that. So what sense does it make to accept that? And I go through this process over and over again, even though the answers are always the same. And it comes back round to because when I resist that feeling, it gets worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you ever want a reason for why would I want to move towards the thing that's uncomfortable, it's this because there's a potential. And I guess each person needs to find this out for yourself because if you try it and then you notice, oh, actually this works, that's going to be your reinforcement
Yeah.
to be able to keep going back into it. But I also noticed that Monday and Tuesday, because I was either working or dealing with the solicitor stuff, yesterday was just a really busy day. It was full. I was talking to different people. I had to go out to the solicitors. I was working. I did a brainstorming session with a friend. I chatted to another friend. I went to a yoga class. And I got to the end of yesterday. And yesterday was a similar day to Monday and Tuesday in terms of still not knowing where I'm at. I realized that, oh, actually, that I say distraction
Mm.
because I'm kind of in this waiting game. I'm in this transitionary period. It made me think the distraction was actually really what I needed. Monday and
Yeah.
Tuesday, I had very little distraction apart from when I was actually in my sessions. And then I wasn't really thinking about it when I'm with the clients.
Mm.
It's kind of like a mindfulness thing for me. I can just be in
Yeah.
what's there. But as soon as I
Yes.
was outside of those sessions, it was just kind
Yes.
of coming at me. I watched the entire first season of The Good Place on Monday at the same time as a full day of work.
Mm. It's pretty impressive.
I know, right? That kind of distraction was just to kind of get me through, and that's fine. Again, a little bit like what happened with the dominoes. It was like that was just what felt available to me at the moment. But Wednesday, having those different kinds of distractions that involved other people, involved connecting to other people, I deliberately thought I'm going to go to a yoga class because I think that will make it easier for me to be with my body if I'm not on my own.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it was true. And it was
Yeah.
it's a very gentle class. It's not a
Yeah.
active one at all.
Mm. Um, okay, so number two is some level of distraction, which is different from numbing or running away from, right? I think we could also use distractions as a way of being like, never mind, I'm feeling fine. The other thing I think is accepting and predicting that when I am stressed, I am probably going to be hungrier and or will need more sugars and carbohydrates to your Domino's sort of experience. I just feel like, yeah, fighting that is again one of those things that makes it worse. And when I feel a certain way about stress, when I'm in a certain stress state, I do need to eat more. And it has done me wonders to accept that because then I'm not adding to that other stress of feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, this is just what happens. And that is not saying I just give myself permission to binge because I don't. And there's a difference between being like, well, I'm using it as an excuse to binge because that's what I think it can read as. It's not. It's just it's staying conscious with my hunger so that I'm able to hear the satiation, which will come later than it normally would, but I'm staying with it. Whereas when we give ourselves permission to binge, we're checking out from that. So when I'm feeling this way, I eat more. I know I listen to the cues I'm getting, and I am also present to hear the cues when they're like, okay, we're done. We're just done later than we normally would have been.
So I guess then the other thing I would want to offer is about a change of state. Again, this might not be an exact opposite. So I think sometimes it's for me, I'll talk my own experience. When I'm in that agitated, stressed state, and then I'm getting on the yoga mat, had I been able to stay, especially on Tuesday night, I don't know so much about Sunday or Monday night. Sunday night was great because getting on the yoga mat made me cry and I felt really calm and I felt really good after that. Monday was a bit more like just resistance. But if Tuesday I'd stayed on the mat, I think that would have brought me down a bit. but it probably wouldn't have brought me completely out of it. For me, again, I think this can be like the pull to black and white thinking, which is more likely to happen when I'm stressed. It
Mm.
can feel a bit like, well, if I do this thing, that's not going to make me feel different enough. It's not going to do a
Fix it.
complete 180. And like, that's not, why would I do that? And the other thing that I did that again was, it was just a mental thing that I did that I found quite helpful was I had a few moments on, I can't remember if it was Tuesday or Wednesday night. No, Tuesday night, where when I was trying to let go of some of this stuff, I took a moment just to be grateful, just to recognize cognitively, not that I was feeling full of gratitude, that I'm in a privileged position that I can buy my own place.
Mm.
Now, gratitude can be problematic when it's like, oh, I need to be grateful because I shouldn't feel like this. I shouldn't feel all stressed. I should just feel blooming lucky
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I'm somebody who can do this. And I don't have the right to feel stressed about this. That's,
Yeah.
not it
Not
at
it.
all. But that, and so I noticed that and I was very conscious about doing that. But having a little moment to kind of allow that piece to exist as well, I think also brought it down a couple of notches.
Yes, I think that's a really great point. I have a client who says, I recognize where there's abundance as well as where there's scarcity. Like, I'm not saying it's not one or the other. It's just that there's both. And sometimes when we're in a stress state, we're only looking at what's wrong instead of what isn't. I
Yeah.
think that's a huge thing. I say, finally, unless you've got more to go. I mean, we could just keep rolling. But sometimes on a cognitive level, what I like to do is say, I'm stressed. Like, I have stress right now. It's
Hmm.
just here. And then I love bullet point because I don't want to journal, but I'll just sit there and like be like, okay, because when one stress is present, when it gets to a certain level, I'm like, come on, all my other stresses just come on in. Like it's kind of like I can't differentiate what I'm actually even stressed about because I'm feeling like the weight of everything I might be stressed about. So I'll do like a bullet point of like stressed about this, stressed about this, stressed about this, and I write them all down just in quick form. And then I'm like, what is my focus now? What is the thing I'm dealing with now that I need to act on or need to do or not potentially, but especially if it's like a procrastinating kind of stress, like a something I have to do kind of stress, to identify what that one thing I'm dealing with is. Understand that there's all these, I've written down the rest, they're accounted for, they're validated, but that there's this one thing that I need to put my attention on because otherwise it's like an invitation to think about too many things that are stressful. And that's very overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to share a couple of things I think are quite interesting about cortisol as a stress hormone. One of them, we do know that cortisol affects our blood sugar level, which speaks to what you're talking about, where you're like, I noticed that my cravings for carbohydrate, sweet foods, or like
Yeah.
carbohydrate dense foods increases. And I experience the same thing as well. Also, when we're stressed, our immune system fires up. So our immune system is working harder when we're stressed as well, which is why when you stop, I don't know if you've ever had the experience, you've been really stressed and then you go on holiday and you get sick. I remember that happening to me when I first started training and I was working full time and studying. And it was just too, I went on holiday, I got sick straight away. Also, the sickest I've been, the only time I've had flu in, say, 20 years was the day after my mum's funeral. And that was after just 6 months of brain surgery, my
Mm.
mum watching her go downhill. And yeah, the day after the funeral, I was bedbound, absolutely bedbound. And also, people who don't have cortisol, so their bodies don't produce it, it's called Addison's disease. And if they were to fall over and break their leg and not get a cortisol injection, they'd fall into a coma and die.
We
It's
need it.
incredible. We do need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And stress can make us stronger as well. But we need to be able to recover from stress. We need to be able
Right.
to like let it come up and bring ourselves down as well. So I think sometimes this idea, I sometimes have this fantasy of, eventually becoming so self-actualized that I'm just constantly zen.
No, that is not going to happen. I've tried.
Well, I've still got some years to go.
I know, but no expectations. It's okay to just be stressed and manage the stress. That's my goal.
Yeah. And that there could actually be benefits to that as well, biologically speaking. So I just thought I'd leave you those little tidbits.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that.
Yes.
I have to pee my pants.
You don't have to pee your pants. You need to pee before you pee your pants.
That's correct. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You are welcome. All right, bye.
All right then.